Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before we get into it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please get a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Jemma Norman on the podcast here with us. She's coming to us all the way from the UK, another one of our British guests that we have on. And she just recently won her pro card, everyone. So everyone, give her a round of applause for that. She just did that. And, she told me we were going to have her on before, but then she's like, I got a bigger story that I think we should wait on for. And she was right. She sent me a message and she's like, I won my pro card. So yeah, it's just so awesome to, finally have her on. And, Jemma, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I ask this question to every single guest, and I'm going to keep asking it no matter how many complaints I get. What is the weather like today?
Quite sunny today, to be honest. I live on the coast, so typically it's always quite windy here, but the weather the last few weeks has been much nicer than what we'd normally get. So I'm hoping we're going to have a bit more than 1 week summer this year.
Yeah, you're telling me. I mean, it's cold here, but at least it's sunny out, as you can tell. So who knows? I might have to take the dog out for a walk or something like that later and go outside and do something. So we'll see. But before we get into all that, I mean, just to start things off, why don't you just first off give us your backstory and what inspired and motivated you to eventually become a bodybuilder and where you're at right now?
It's really funny because back when I was at school, I was always that, like, the chubby girl, wasn't that pretty, just kind of like just just that girl at school. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I kind of hit about 17, started training at the gym, sort of just dabbling in and out of a bit of cardio, a little bit of weights, didn't really know what I was doing. And then I had a friend, she done a competition, and that's what inspired me initially. So she's a bikini girl. She went on to do two bros in the UK. She's done quite well, but she's now come away from that and gone back to her equestrian career. And it kind of got to a point where I spent so much time in the gym that I felt like I needed a goal. I needed to aim towards something. And then I was like, right, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to start a prep. I'm going to start training for a show. And that's exactly what I did. So I started around, I think it was the end of 2018, where I kind of made this decision. And then I went into a prep around, I think it was March time the following year, so 2019. Did my first show in June, which was a local show in bikini. Quickly established that I'm just not built for bikini. Naturally, I'm just stronger, broader. Just was never going to be able to get small enough to fit in the category. So I did a couple of shows that year. Obviously, it didn't go that well because I just don't fit the category. So I took that feedback, took a step back, and thought, right, I'm going to make the most of my ability to train heavy and hard and go for figure. And that's got me to where I am now.
So was there anyone because we hear this a lot, like, was there anyone in the gym that was just like, oh, you should compete, or did you find out about the sport yourself, or was it through people? How did you first hear about bodybuilding?
There's always been people that I've been inspired by. So um, typically I've always sort of followed the Olympia shows, always watched the Arnold Classic. And then as I've got more into it, I've kind of been inspired more by the younger bodybuilders. So like over in the US, you've got people like Nick Walker, you've got Brandon Curry. They don't say anything that they're not actually doing. They say it, they get the job done, they don't complain, and it all pays off. They're very straight to the point, and they just inspire so many different people.
I do follow those guys that you're talking about, yeah, and I do appreciate that part about them too as well, because there's so many people that don't do that, so it's really refreshing to see people that actually do follow that and say, like, anything that I do or anything that you do that I recommend is going to be something that I do as well. So, that is a breath of fresh air, definitely in the sport. But I mean, there's so many misconceptions that the general public has about this sport, and that's why I love to have bodybuilders on, because it's like, so many people do not understand. And I've said this a million times, but like, there are people that I talk to that I say, like, oh yeah, I have a lot of bodybuilders on my podcast, and they're like, oh, those are the people that just work out a lot and then they go on stage and they pose, and it's like, you got 1% of it. You got a few of the basics down. But what would you say are probably some of the biggest misconceptions that you deal with on an everyday basis as a bodybuilder? Because I mean, like, the public is just so uneducated when it comes to the sport.
There's a lot of things, but I think the one thing that people misunderstand is kind of what goes into it. So, you'll talk to the average Joe Blogs down at the gym or at work, and they'll just automatically assume that that you diet on next to no food, literally no carbs, no nothing, and they think that that's the way you get the job done. And then you've got the opposite end of the scale where there is a misconception on like drug usage and stuff. So you've got the other end of the scale where people are automatically assuming that you're pumping in loads and loads of different drugs, and that's how you're getting to where you are. Um, it's questions that I get a lot. So I'll get people say in my DMs and stuff, and they're trying to find like that magical substance or just whatever it is that they think that is going to get them to where I am. And the answer is, you have to be committed and you have to put the work in. And it's not just going to happen overnight. It's something that happens over time, and it will happen as quickly as you want it to. It just depends how committed you are to that.
I am still waiting patiently for that magic pill to arrive that you can just take and everything will be all right.
Great, wouldn't it?
Oh my god, yeah, it would be. I am still on the waiting list for that. So who knows? One of these days, hopefully, at least in my lifetime, they'll figure out something like that where it's like, oh, I don't have to go and work out and eat all that much. Are you kidding me? So yeah, hopefully, but we'll see if that ever does happen. But I mean, when you are getting into this lifestyle, I mean, one of the biggest myths that so many people have about it is it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but there's still unfortunately so many women that have that fear that if they walk into the gym and they pick up one dumbbell, they're going to put on, like 50 pounds of muscle overnight. And it's like, first of all, I would spend my entire life savings to train with you then because you have found the secret that everybody and their brother's looking for. But did you ever have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I mean, I bet you still hear that reaction all the time. How do you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I do get that quite a lot. I think back when I was younger, I did initially think the same thing, but you quickly realize that that isn't the case, and you have to eat, a lot of food to grow, especially as a female as well. It's very difficult to build muscle naturally, and you just have to put in the effort. You're not just going to pick up a 50-kilo barbell or whatever, and and then overnight you're going to have shoulders the size of Ronnie Coleman. It just doesn't work.
And if it does, she'll hire you as her trainer then, basically.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it is ridiculous. And I do gotta say though, there are those like 1% genetic freaks who it almost does happen to them like that. And I've had like two of them on the podcast, which is like I don't even want to talk to them. I want to kick them off and be like, I'm done. I'm done with you because this is just ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, I still laugh at it to this day because it's just like why would you think that? I mean, first of all, I wish I had that type of self-confidence because then I would be the CEO of like a Fortune 500 company right now. But yeah, it is just not the case. But I mean, one thing that isn't talked about as much as it should be is just the mental side of the sport too as well, where it's like this is so much more of a mental journey than it is a physical journey. And just because people are just gonna come up to you and say, like, Jemma, you look amazing, the physical transformation is the one thing that they'll notice, but they won't really, it's not really that much aware of the mental change that's happening. But what has this whole journey been like for you mentally?
Um, Sort of up and down, really. It's like you say, a lot of people just don't understand what goes into it. They think that it's a case of you get up, you go to the gym, you eat, and that's it. But it's not like that. It's a 24/7 lifestyle. So for me as an athlete, I'm getting up in the morning, I'm doing fasted cardio, I'm checking in with my coach all the time. You've then got the posing that you have to do. Going to the gym maybe twice a day, things like that. Trying to find time to chill out for an hour around that, getting enough sleep, staying stress free, getting sports massages, just everything that goes into it that people wouldn't necessarily think about. I live on my own as well, so have a house to run. I've got a horse, I've got a dog. I work a full-time job as well, so that's 40 hours a week during the day. And it's like you're literally squeezing everything in around that, and people literally just think that all you do is go to the gym and that's it. It's crazy.
I think we can see part of the dog in the background. I don't know, but that's awesome. But so how do you how do you have enough time to deal with a horse, a job, and being a bodybuilder? Because dealing with a horse, that's a lot of work, especially on top of all that stuff.
I don't know. Some days I just feel like time just disappears. So every day is there's just not enough hours in the day. I've got friends that do help me out here and there. My horse, I'm not doing so much with now. Back when I was younger, I used to do a lot of competitive, like horse riding. So that's what I typically did before I started bodybuilding. And then I sold two of my horses, and I've just got one now. So I have a lot more time than I used to have. But he's more of a pet to me now than sort of like a sport.
That hey, that time management that bodybuilders have, that's the most impressive thing about any of this lifestyle to me, really, is just because like I look at that, and if I had two of those three things that you have, I probably would have already like pulled my hair out and stuff like that and just like given up. So, more power to you. But I also love to talk about genetics on this podcast because so many people are on Instagram and I hear this all the time. Oh my God, I want her abs. I want his arms. I want their back. And it's just want to strangle them because it's like you do not understand that you can train just as hard as someone, you can eat just like them, and unfortunately God or whoever you believe in just didn't give you the right stuff that they have. It's just I hate to say it to some people, but it's like some people are just not genetically blessed to be like very in shape. But
No.
on top of all of that, whenever someone first gets started working out, they always have that one body part that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And they have that one body part that just drags behind. They have to train to oblivion just basically to get to catch up. I mean, my back was the one thing that really, really took off for me because, I worked in warehouses a lot in college. So you either got a really nice back or you quit. But my legs and my lower body are just absolutely shot because, I am 6'3", so my lower body, don't even get me started. I mean, calf raises don't even, that's the one area for me is calves where I could do 10,000 calf raises. I could inject pure muscle into my legs and they ain't grown a bit. It's just not going to happen. But when you were getting started, what was one body part that really took off for you? And then one body part that really dragged behind that you're still training to this day?
I think for me, just from all of the horse riding that I used to do, my legs have always been my strongest point. Um, Over time, I've kind of backed off training them so hard because I didn't really want to end up in wellness. So for me, I would say at the moment it's my back. I don't have to train it that hard. It naturally just it just seems to grow, and it's something that I focus on mainly for figure anyway because they always say that figure is one from the back. So you've got to have that glute ham tie in, you've got to have a thick back, the width, just the overall sort of full package, really. Um, so yeah, I think legs would be my strongest point initially, but as I've backed off training them, I'll say it's my back these days.
I would have guessed your legs just from the moment that you said you were a horse rider. I was like, okay, let's see what she says though, because I've had other horse riders on. I've had like 3 or 4 of them on, and they do have similar things where yeah, it's just a great leg workout to stay on that horse and steer that thing. So yeah, more power to you on that. Where it's like I love to ask that question because everyone's body's built different. You're gonna get different answers. But one of my favorite questions to ask too is, what was your friends and family's reaction like when you announced them like, hey, I want to give bodybuilding a try? Because that's not something that a lot of people hear from their family or friends.
Um, I think it came as quite a shock to my family because they don't do anything like that. You wouldn't find them in the gym. So for someone like my grandma, she thinks it's ludicrous. She doesn't understand why I would want to stand on stage in a bikini in front of thousands of people on a live stream, photographs, all of that. She just doesn't get it. And it's the same sort of with my mum and dad. Like they appreciate what I do and they kind of will congratulate me, but they're not necessarily interested because they don't understand and they just they don't really see the point in it, if you get what I mean. It's not necessarily the most rewarding sport, especially if you're not someone that is genetically gifted or if you're not doing well. You can find that you'll do a 20-week prep and be heavily disappointed, and then you've got people around you thinking, "Why do you bother?" So there are pros and cons to it.
The biggest thing that shocked me most is that it's not the most rewarding financially too. It's like you're not making money doing this sport unless you're like winning the Olympia, basically. Where that's one thing too. Where I looked at it, and that's just like
Yeah, it
that's
is
that's
very
insane.
expensive. Yeah.
Yes. And what is that? What is that like, especially around the holidays with your family? Because I can imagine that must be stressful at times too. Because like one of the reasons why I don't think I ever really could compete too is like if I were to go to my parents' house on Christmas or even like Easter, Thanksgiving, or any of the holidays, I would be forced to eat and probably gain about 5 pounds just sitting at that table.
Yeah. Um, I try not to prep around Christmas and things because I like to have a bit of a balance. You have to have a life as well. And bodybuilding is something that it's so strict that you can't have anything. You can't go out for meals. I wouldn't go and sit in a restaurant with my friends whilst they ate, things like that. So around Christmas, I wouldn't be on prep. I would have a bit of downtime and probably eat everything in sight, which is typically what I did last Christmas. So I had a few days, completely let my hair down, and then I went on prep a few days after Christmas. It's always hard going to my grandma's house because she has biscuits everywhere. She wants to feed me. She's like, "Are you hungry?" every 5 minutes, and I'm like, "No, I'm okay. I'm okay. Just I won't starve."
Oh
But
yeah. That's the hardest thing for me too, is like going to those places and knowing that you're going to be force fed basically regardless. You can say no as much as you want, but eventually they'll just wear you out and then it'll be like, okay,
yeah.
fine, give me this stuff. But I mean, now the most important thing, I mean, you just recently won your pro card, and that is, just so amazing. What was that reaction like for you when they announced your name and you realized like, oh my god, I'm a pro now?
Do you know what? It's been 4 days, and I'm still trying to get my head around it. I'm I'm naturally quite a self-critical person. So, I told myself every day leading up to this show, from the minute I picked that show last November, when the schedule got released from the Pro League, that I would win the show. And I could tell myself that every single day. But at the same time, there's always that doubt in the back of your head where you can hope, but there's never the expectation. And, I was so worried about disappointing people around me, because there were so many people that were like, "You're going to do it. You're going to do it. You look the best you've ever looked, and it's yours." And I just couldn't believe that. But at the same time, you have to convince yourself that you're going to do it, because if you don't believe it, you cannot expect anyone else to encourage you or believe you. So, I mean, I was nearly in tears when they announced my name. I just stood there and I was like, wow, I just can't believe that I've done it. I've gone from eighth at my last show, so last place at my last show 6 months ago, to beating 8 girls at this one.
What would you say was the biggest improvement that you've made from that last show where you placed eighth to now winning your pro card?
Um, so the last prep came with a lot of issues. It's really hard to go into it without kind of looking like I'm going to slate my old coach, but
No worries.
there is, with a prep, you have to be on the ball. You have to have the attention to detail. You have to be quick with changes and making sure that progress always ticking along. Condition is king when it comes to placings. You can have the size, the shape, you can be pretty, but if you haven't got the condition, you're not going to come anywhere. And after a 26-week prep, I was heavily disappointed. I wasn't anywhere near where I wanted to be for that show, and it didn't pay off. Um, so after that, I was determined that that was never going to happen again, because the feeling that I had after I left that show, it's not, after all that work you put in, you just don't want to feel like that. And it just makes you think, does anyone see that I'm good enough, or am I just not good enough for the sport? Should I give up? Um, so I kind of took a step back, did a bit of an off season, kind of got healthy again, and then I reevaluated the situation, started with a new coach, went into a prep after Christmas, and then we just started to draw in the condition. We were on the ball from day one, so started to get the weight off, but at a steady pace, bringing in the condition, but holding the fullness and the size, um, and that led me to where I am now.
What is the hardest part about show day for you? Because I look at show days and I mean, there's so many things, whether it's your tan, whether it's just being so depleted, whether it's getting that posing down right, or, I mean, there's just so many little things that can go wrong. What would you say is probably the hardest thing that you struggle with on show day?
Um, it's controlling my nerves for me, because if people hype me up too much, then it almost puts too much pressure on me, and then I start to get sort of really flustered backstage. And if it gets to a point where that gets too much, I then will not be able to hold it on stage. It'll just get worse and worse, and then that obviously leads to affecting your posing and just your overall stage presence. So that's always something that I'm really conscious of, because I'm not the most confident person on stage, and I have to try really, really hard to not let it show. Um, I'm not a natural poser either. I'm not like a naturally sassy person that walks on stage like Sydney Gillen and just, struts her stuff and is just an all-time goddess. So I have to try really hard to control all of those factors.
Well, like I mentioned with a lot of especially bikini competitors, where like you do need to have your sass, but like for the UK, it's sort of like that as well. Where does that sass and stuff come from? Is it something that you've tried to learn, or because like there are a lot of people that are just like I said, Gillen, who are just naturally born for this sport, where like they could just they just have that sass and that flair. It's something that they're born with. But for someone like you who doesn't really have that naturally, how have you sort of been able to manufacture it? Is it something that you sort of just learned?
I think it is something you kind of just pick up over time. You just have to practice and practice until you find your rhythm. You typically find people that have a background of being like a dancer or something in that area. They kind of are very natural at it. So you find that they always flow really nicely. So you might find that I'll watch YouTube videos just to try and pick up different tactics or different routines and try to find what fits my physique, because that ultimately is going to help the most. If you find poses that suit, you can just adapt and tailor it to what suits you.
And out of the poses that you do, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
I used to really hate my side pose, but now I'd probably say it's one of my favorite poses just because of the detail we managed to bring in my legs this time. My back shot is typically my strongest shot just because of the hamstrings, and just having the back width that I've managed to bring this time. And I'd say my front shot is normally not my favorite at all.
Yeah, I mean, the back was the only thing that I'd ever really probably be good at. First of all, because my back, and then second of all, you can put your smile down. You don't gotta, because most people don't understand that jaw muscle is going to be some of the most sore that you're ever going to get after one of these shows, just because. First of all, you're not meant to smile for that long a period of time. I'm not naturally a huge smiler, so for me, yeah,
No,
that
neither
would
am
be
I.
yeah, that's the killer right there for me. But what was your post show meal that you had after you won your pro card? What did you have?
So I had pretty much had like a box of goodies backstage. So I typically like to bake. People don't understand how I do it on prep, but I find it quite therapeutic when I have like a small smidge of time to do something like that. So I baked some cookies and this like little cookie pie thing, which after I'd kind of come off my high from what just happened on stage, I pretty much demolished half of that. And then myself and my friend, we went out to a Hard Rock cafe in Stockholm, and I had pretty much like a double stacked burger and fries.
Stockholm, yeah, I've always wanted to. I mean, I'm mainly Norwegian, so I wanted to go just to Scandinavia in general and just see that. But yeah, I've always wanted to be there, so I hope you enjoyed it there. But I mean, first of all, the definition of psychotic, I think, is someone who does bake during prep for therapy, because that is just, how do you do it? Like, I know that you probably hear this a lot, but how do you do that? Because like for me, I would not like as soon as the stove turned on, I would be eating the batter or something like that, or I would just be like, how do you have that sort of control? Because that to me is just so foreign to me.
I think for me, I have to make sure that I've always got a meal left or that I'm eating my meal at the same time. There is nothing more soul destroying than washing chocolate off the spoon. So I have to distract myself from that. But I typically will leave it really late. So leading up to the show, maybe like the week before peak week. And then in my head, it's just a case of, I've managed the whole prep without cheating on my diet. A few days won't hurt. To me, the goal, obviously winning that pro card, was always going to be more important to me than eating a brownie or something. So um, it, I think afterwards, once they're sat in the fridge, it was a bit more difficult because every time you open the fridge, they're just there, and I'm like, we really could eat that, but
Yeah, that is, yeah, I mean, that is torture, but hey, more power to you that you're able to go through with that, because I could never, I do not have that strong of a willpower to be able to do that. So more kudos to you. But I mean, this is a question that I've only recently been asking people, and I'm surprised it took me so long as it did, but like, I even have this thought sometimes having guests on where it's like, why do they do this to themselves? Like, why? Like, I've had guests on that, like they do like just go to the extremes with this sport, and it's like, why did they? Now obviously I know why, but like, even though it's like deep down I'm just like, how do they do this to themselves? Like, why do they do this to themselves? What is the answer that you like to give people when they're just like, why do you compete in this sport? Because there are, I mean, if even the host of the podcast is sometimes thinking like, why do they do this to themselves? Like, what's the end goal? What is your reasoning why? Like, what's the response that you like to give people when they're just like, why do you put yourself through this?
um, it depends really. It depends who's asking, but typically I'm a very self-driven person, and if I can inspire at least one person from what I'm doing, then that makes me happy. And I always get people that will DM me asking questions, how or wishing they looked like me, and that just drives me to keep doing what I'm doing. Obviously, previously when I wasn't doing so well on the competing front, I did have times when I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. It's just a waste of time. Um, but I'm a big believer in never giving up, and that your time will come eventually. And it seems like that has just happened for me. So
That was me 100%. I mean, even with just the workout journey and with the podcast, like my first 200 to 300 guests, like, yeah, this podcast was absolutely nothing. Like, it was getting
Yeah.
no views, no nothing. And I was just like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? And then it just took a couple of lucky guests in a row that really started to take things off. So, yeah, anyone that's struggling with that, yeah, just keep doing what you love because, if anything, you just get to enjoy it. And it's, that's the same thing I consider with bodybuilding too, where it's like, these people, they do it for a goal. I mean, now I do know some of those freaks that work out as much as bodybuilders and they don't compete. And it's just like, okay, that's where you got to be like, okay, what are you doing this for? What are you doing this for, guy? And like, because everyone knows those people that like they could go on stage and compete, but they're just like, no, I don't want to. But I'm gonna spend 3 hours a day at the gym and have like the best nutrition out of anyone. And you're just like, okay,
Yeah.
what's going on here? But so yeah, there's that. But one thing that I do love to talk about is post-show blues, because most people do not understand, like when you get that message a lot of, oh my god, I want to look just like you, they don't understand that you don't look like that 24/7. You're not having that stage look 24/7. Unfortunately, that is not the case. I mean, people don't understand that the way that you've dieted down and the way that preps go, I mean, it's like you're not gonna be able to maintain that look. And as unfortunate as it is, but what has that reaction been like for you as your career has gone on? Has it gotten easier for you to accept that you're not going to look like this, or is it still something that you? Well, obviously, a lot of people do struggle with it, but has it gotten easier for you to accept that? That like, hey, I'm not going to be able to maintain this look 24/7.
Um, at times it can be really hard because you get used to looking a certain way. And as a female, I think we typically like to be on the leaner side anyway. I think men typically get away with being more fluffy than what we do. They're not
Oh,
judged as much.
guys don't care. I mean, guys can put on as much weight as they want. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's yeah.
No one cares. No one judges a guy. Whereas, like a girl, I might put on 10, 15 kilos and someone would turn around and say that was looking fat, for example. But, I kind of have to drill into my own head that it's for a reason. You do need a healthy level of body fat to, grow and stay healthy, keep your hormones in check. And you just need to have that downtime just to bring everything back up to where it needs to be. And to be competitive, if you look at all the Olympians, none of them are really staying lean in the off season. They're making their improvements, they're getting to a healthy state, and then they'll diet back down. And that's how it should be. Instagram is a funny place because obviously a lot of people will look to people's Instagram pages for inspiration, and no one posts anything bad on Instagram. You only see the best pictures, basically. So a lot of people are looking up to a lot of women typically that look lean on Instagram all the time, but you don't know how much that's been edited. You don't know how old the picture is. You don't know kind of what state they're in health wise, and it can get to your head. And you sit there and you think, why don't I look like her all year round? It can be tough in that sense.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm glad that I never really was into Instagram really before I started this podcast, because yeah, I could not have imagined, like, if I was competing, just comparing myself to others. And I don't really bring that up as much because a lot of people they just play it off like, oh yeah, that's not a problem, where it's like, okay, come on. Like, honestly, you're a human being. Like, obviously you're gonna look at other people and just be like, okay, how do they look like that when I'm just looking? So that's a whole nother mental conundrum that is just insane to me to even like deal with. But I mean, I always like to compare it to starting your own business, where it's like you gotta spend money to make money, you gotta put on weight if you want to put on muscle. Unfortunately, those two do go hand in hand, and it's just it's unfortunately something you gotta do. And you always see those one or two people that do try to keep that lean look year round, and then their career lasts like 1 or 2 years, and then you're just like, okay, yeah, that's why. So it's definitely the healthy part of it. But I mean, in this lifestyle, there's so many things that, like we talked about before, that most people just do not understand. But probably the biggest one for so many people is just the nutrition side of things, that it's so important. And a lot of people just still to this day don't grasp that, like the whole abs remain in the kitchen thing and all the other nutritional things. But what were some of the biggest nutritional changes that you made in your life being a bodybuilder?
Um, just having a cleaner sort of schedule, really. Back when I was younger, I probably ate quite a lot more takeaways, just was a bit reckless with food, just kind of, I either wouldn't eat anything all day and then just kind of binge on crap, or it would just be snacking on stuff all day that was just no good for your nutrition. And as I got more developed into bodybuilding, you soon find that the clean food, it helps you grow, and you also feel better. The cleaner you eat, you just feel like a different person. You find that if you were eating sugar and crap all day long, you start to feel sluggish. You might get bloated, water retention. Um, and I don't like to feel like that. I'm a creature of habit as well, so I've been eating sort of chicken and rice and all that stuff for for months, and I just get used to it, and I quite enjoy my food anyway. So I I don't really find it difficult to stick to that.
I mean, once you do get used to it, yeah, it's a lifestyle that really comes into it, and you know, how do you find ways to spice things up at least though? Because it's like I know people that put like mustard on their chicken. I know people that do all these crazy things. Do you at least find little ways to spice things up? Because no matter how used to it you can get, I mean, if you were just eat that plain chicken day in and day out, which I know some people do, and more power to them, but do you find any way to sort of mix things up when it comes to the food?
Um, so even during prep, I was still using like spices. So I was using things like barbecue or Cajun, adding in like chopped onion and things. There's no harm in stuff like that in food, in moderate quantities, because I know that that can affect your digestion a little bit. So in small quantities, that's fine. And obviously, you've then got very low sugar sauces, 0 calorie sauces. I don't really use them that much just because of all the artificial things that are in them. Again, when it comes to digestion, it's not necessarily that great. So I tend to just stick to seasonings, salt, pepper, um, because I don't believe that you should have to have plain chicken and rice. So
Yeah, that is yeah, that plain chicken and rice. I mean, it's fine if you have it for a couple, and that's basically what I was having when I went on my mini prep for like 4 or 5 weeks, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm done with this because it's fine the first couple of weeks, and then you're just like, what are we having for dinner today? Oh, wonder what
yeah,
it is. What are we having for? I mean, yeah, it's so yeah, do definitely find ways, and that's one thing that if I would have probably mixed things up, I probably would have lasted at least another like 3 or 4 weeks at least. But there was no way else. I already made that pledge to the guy. I was like, I'm not stepping on stage. I'm just seeing how long I can last. Like even if I do make it to the day one, like I'm not going on that stage just because I just didn't want to, and that's just that's a whole different thing. But I mean, on top of all the things that go into this lifestyle, cardio is the bane of my existence. I hate it more than life itself. And when I say cardio, I mean like actual running. I mean, I live next to a lot of nature parks, so I can go on a lot of walks. I mean, I live in Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, so there's like 3 lakes within walking distance of me, like a mile of me. But what is your relationship like with cardio? Because unfortunately, when you sort of become a bodybuilder, that deal with the devil that you have to sign it's bad at times.
um, a bit of a love hate relationship, really. So during the off season, I typically wouldn't normally do that much, but I'm trying to keep my condition this time around. Obviously, now I'm in the pro league, I've kind of got to keep up with the big girls, which means that I have to stay in a better state. um, but I don't look forward to it. I don't enjoy it at all. It's just one of those things that you have to kind of get in a bit of a robotic state and just get it done. So during my prep, I was typically doing 2 lots a day. So I'd do, for example, 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night. And then towards the end, I was doing 2 hours a day just to pull that condition right in. And it did work. I actually switched coach at 3 weeks out. I moved over to a guy called Justin Jacoby. He works for Matt Jansen, and he was just a godsend. So I was checking in with him daily. We made some really rapid changes in that time, and you know, I don't think I would have got to where I am now without him. To be honest, he's been amazing. So
That's the one thing that I tell people just getting started is like, yeah, find a coach because that
yeah.
is find the right coach too. Because for every good coach, there's more bad coaches out there. So it's just wading through the water and finding that. But how do you keep yourself entertained when you're doing 2 hours of cardio? Because that's the worst thing for me too. Is like if I don't have my music playing or if I don't have a TV show to watch. Where during COVID, it was funny. Like I ran out of movies to watch and TV shows to watch because like I watched so many of them because I had to stay inside do cardio. How do you keep yourself occupied? Because that to me is the biggest struggle for me at least.
Um, Probably a little bit of Netflix here and there. I kind of got to the point that you got to, which was not having anything to watch. So I'll just have either a podcast on or some music. But I've got a bike at home which literally faces a wall. And in the morning, I just don't really have any sort of interest in anything. So I'd find myself just staring at the wall for an hour, half asleep, just trying to get it done. But that's kind of the dark side of prep that people don't see, the nitty gritty bits that you have to do to get that condition. So,
Well, I mean, the worst part about prep and basically life in general is sleep. I mean, I believe me, I love a good night's sleep, but I mean, when you are in prep, good luck getting a good night's sleep. I mean, I've had probably about out of like the 400 bodybuilders I've had on, I've had 5 or 6 of them that actually like keep a somewhat decent sleep schedule, or at least that they tell me. So it's about like 1.5% of the people that I have on, but what does your sleep schedule look like, especially like now as you are coming off a show, but you're still in the leaner phase? Is sleep just almost impossible for you, like it is for a lot of people?
I think it's actually worse now than it was before the show. I'm not really sure why. I don't know if it's because, I'm still trying to get my head around what's gone on and I can't switch off. But typically on prep, I will struggle to sleep more than about 6 hours. I can't get to sleep until midnight, and I'll be awake again at like 5 or 6 o'clock before my alarm. It doesn't matter how shattered I am. I don't know what it is. It must just be like a prep thing. But it's really hard to switch off and get to bed. But it's also the most important thing when it comes to a prep.
Yeah, I mean, I just cannot understate, just how important sleep is, and I always compare it to being like that one great night of sleep that I get probably about once a month, where you wake up feeling like a superhero just because you're so well rested. But out of all those days, there's about a dozen other ones where you get about like 5 to 6 hours, and you wake up and you're just like, after that accumulates for a couple of days, you just wake up feeling like death, and you're just like, okay, I gotta find something to really pull myself through. And I do not drink coffee myself too, because as you can tell, I'm already a very hyper person. So could you imagine me on coffee? My head would probably explode. So for the safety of the public, I don't do that. And yeah, so it's just never ending there. But like, let's also be honest too, like, you're not the average looking woman. If you were to walk out in public dressed the way that you are right now, you are going to get stares, just because it's human nature when they see something that's not of the normal to just be like, oh wow, that's interesting. What has that journey been like for you, just sort of dealing with the fact that like you are going to get more people's attention? Has it gotten easier for you as your career's gone on, and how do you deal with that attention too?
Um, Sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming at times because I don't expect the attention and I don't necessarily want it at the same time. So, it's sometimes really hard to think, these people are actually noticing me. Why, I'm actually that special, or do I look that great that people are even paying any attention? And it was the same at the show. I was really surprised, like the amount of people that knew who I was. I was getting messages from like pro bodybuilders from the States that, they wouldn't have even known I existed previously. And I just thought, how have I come so far that these people are actually recognizing where I've come to? Um, I have like Keon Pearson,
Yep.
so he was at the show, and um, he couldn't have been more supportive. There was just other people around me that, again, I just was just blown away by what they were saying and the level of support that I was getting throughout the whole day. I had Branch Warren. He even approached me and he said, "You have no idea how much I want you to win." And at that moment, I could have just cried. So, with my downfall is my self confidence. So for someone like that to recognize my ability, to see my potential more than I can see it myself, it was a bit of an eye opener for me, really.
Yeah, that is awesome. I mean, like, as someone that does struggle with self-confidence issues myself, obviously,
Mm.
you sort of picked a wrong sport when you have self-confidence issues
Yeah.
to become a body. How do you deal with that? Because being a bodybuilder, that's self-confidence issues on steroids, literally, basically, where it's just like
Yeah.
it's almost impossible. Like, how do you deal with that?
It's a bit of a battle, really. So I think part of why I do it is to force myself out of my comfort zone. Nothing great ever comes from staying in that comfort zone. So, I have goals that I want to achieve, and I'm not going to get there just by hiding in the corner because I can't get myself out of the box and show that I'm capable of doing something. So I kind of have to just almost ignore it. It's like having a devil on your shoulder all the time in your ear saying that you can't do it, or like people in the background that are trying to hold you back. But you have to kind of just push through it. And then, like I say, at the weekend with, what was being said to me, that kind of just opened my eyes that I should start to kind of believe in myself a bit more and that I am capable of a lot more.
Yeah, just that self-confidence, I mean, I'm sorry, that is just a pain in the butt, and a lot of people struggle with it. Especially, that's the one thing that I found that was so funny with bodybuilders. It's the funniest thing for me about this sport is that these are the people that you would think probably wouldn't have the most self-confidence issues, but they do. Just that I've gotten so many texts from some of them as they get close to a show, like, "Do I look fat?" And it's like, just look in the damn mirror. Like, honestly, like, what are you talking about and stuff like that. Where I mean, it just comes with the territory though, and I suffered from it myself too. Where I'd even tell people, it's like, "Do I look like I'm in shape?" And they're like, "Dude, you have like an 8 pack. Like, what are you talking about?" And it's like, okay, fine. This is my college years when I was in a lot better shape than I am right now. But it's just, yeah, just that it's one of the unsung things about the sport is the whole body image thing. But it's great that you're finding a way to help control it too and stuff like that, because so many people, you see that it takes them to such dark places where you're just like, oh, it's the other dark side of sport. But I mean, if someone were to also walk up to you and say, Gemma, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you'd like to see changed?
Um, that's a difficult question to answer, really. I think people just need to be more authentic and more honest, because there is so much false information in the sport. People lie about a lot of different things that go on. Um, and I think it can just create quite a negative environment for the sport. Um, People need to support each other a lot more. You find that there's a lot of people watching, but they're not necessarily supporting you. They're kind of waiting for you to fail. And it should just be more of a community where people are looking out for each other. They want everyone to do well. Um, just being better people, really.
I mean, whether I mean the one that gets me the most is like people who are just like, oh, just work out just like me, and you're gonna look just like me, and it's like those are the people that I just want to see canceled and just taken off the internet and stuff like that. And there's luckily there's not as many as you'd think there would be, but there's still a lot of them out there. And the people that like people edit photos and do all that stuff, it's like, yeah, if people were just be like, honestly, I agree with you 1,000,000%. Yeah.
That's one thing that's been highlighted recently, just with the amount of photoshopping. So you see, like the pros on Instagram, they're pro level. They've probably been to the Olympia 5 times, and they're still photoshopping their pictures. And you think you're already at the top. You've got a perfect physique. There is no need for you to be doing what you're doing. And I don't agree with that. The amount of people that look up to these people and think, oh, I'd love to look like her. Why do my legs not look like her? Why haven't I got a small waist that she's got? And it's like, that's because the girl doesn't even look like the girl in the picture. Um, and a lot of people don't understand that. And when you get people that are fresh in the gym that wouldn't understand that even goes on, they're sort of being misled, given a false expectation. And that's probably the biggest problem at the minute.
When I learned that stuff in college, yeah, I was so upset when I was like, wait, people actually do that and they do that stuff, because I got into the gym wanting to look like someone. It's just, first of all, with the right Photoshop, I could look like Jay Cutler, basically like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the way that Photoshop has come on, ever since I was like I mean, I'm 27, but ever since I was like 10, Photoshop has evolved, to such an extent where that could happen. But yeah, it is ridiculous. But I do, there are so many people being like the people that you mentioned that you follow here in the States that are just so honest with people, and I think they are doing wonders for the sport. But when we do have you on a year from now, because I'd love to talk to you in a year, just give us an update on what you've been up to. What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved with your bodybuilding, just with your overall life? Where would you like to be at a year from today?
Um, so at the moment, we've kind of decided between me and my coach that I'm going to take a year off. I think to be competitive against the bigger girls, I need to gain a bit more size. I got some feedback from the head judge whilst I was there on Sunday, and he pretty much said he would like to see more delt, a bit more back density, a bit more quad sweep, just overall sort of a little bit more everywhere. So we're going to work on that, and then my next goal would be to do a pro debut in the US. And to tie in with that, I've always had a dream of moving to the US anyway, so that is pretty much on my agenda at the minute. Whilst I've got free time to look into that, I'm kind of looking into my options of being able to move over there permanently.
What part of the U.S.?
Um, so I think for me, my coach is based in Florida, so it would either be that area or maybe Texas. I've got a lot of contacts that kind of are part of the GASP team, so getting in with that community gives me the opportunity to kind of engage with the right circle of people and just pushing more towards my goals, really.
Go to Texas. Don't go to Florida. I mean, I've been to Florida and I've also been to Texas, but like I'm on the opposite end of the country. Like I'm right. First of all, don't come to Minnesota. It's too damn cold. Like don't even think about it. Like there's a reason why we have probably a handful at best of bodybuilders, male or female, in this state, because it's so damn cold. But like, yeah, do not Florida. I went there for a spring trip for baseball. It's so muggy there. And then there's alligators and everything. It's like, you don't want to deal with that. And there's some of the people that live there. Now, I'm not saying that the person that you know that's from Florida is a bad person, but like overall, the people from Florida, I mean, they have the most hilarious stories on the planet of stuff happening, like a guy stabbing his brother over him eating his mac and cheese or stuff like that. Like it's the Wild West down there still to this day. But yeah, I'd say go to Texas. But no, yeah, that is awesome, and that's looking forward to seeing where you're at. And I mean, when it comes down to also, I mean, just this whole lifestyle, what would you say is probably the number one piece of advice that you would give for someone who might walk up to you and say, like, hey, I've been thinking about maybe, giving bodybuilding a try myself as well?
Um, I think I would say that time is your best friend. A lot of people have an expectation that these things can happen overnight or that you can turn pro in a year, which if you're genetically gifted, yes, you probably could, or if you just happen to have a lucky win. Um, but you have to put in the work and you have to be committed. You can't be half in and half out or unsure if you want to compete or not, or just doing it to please other people. If you do it for the wrong reasons, you're going to fail. If you're doing it to try and please Instagram or just for the sake of popularity or something like that, it's not going to get you anywhere. You have to be authentic. You have to be doing it for the right people and yourself, and be surrounded by the right people as well.
I mean, I couldn't have thought a better way to end it myself, because so many people, yeah, they do. I talked to a handful of them that literally you can tell that they're just doing it for the wrong reasons. And when I messaged them a year later saying like, "Hey, do you want to come back on?" "Oh no, I'm not bodybuilding anymore. I'm just doing something else." And you're just like, "Okay, yeah, that's." And you can tell from some people, but yeah, I can tell that you just have a great future in the sport. And again,
It's a real shame because over in the UK, I've seen quite a few people turn pro, and then, like you say, they just kind of disappear off the radar. And you think it was almost a bit of a wasted win because they've turned pro. They could, push on and go and do a pro debut next year or whenever, but they don't. It's just kind of like their ultimate goal was to win a pro card, but then they're not doing anything with it. And you kind of think it's just such a waste. There's so many opportunities out there, especially in the sport. The world is your oyster. There's competitions globally, and I just think, why wouldn't you get out there and explore?
100%. I am of the same exact opinion. I mean, lastly, before we wrap things up, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Probably my coach, to be honest, because he's just been a godsend. He's a friend of mine. He was literally up every few hours whilst I was at the show. Obviously, he's 6 hours behind being in Florida. So there's me sort of getting ready at 9 a.m. and he's trying to sleep and getting up every few hours to check in with me, make sure that I'm okay. And he's just been fantastic. And I just wouldn't be where I am without him. So
That is the only thing that I do not like about this podcast is the time differences that I have some of these guests on. We're like, the UK is fine somewhat. Australians, no, they're 15 hours ahead of me. So like, I am talking to them at like 8 o'clock at night, and it is like, it's like 11 a.m. the next day. So like, it's funny. I had a guest on who it was Easter technically, and it was still Saturday night for me, like at like 7 o'clock. And I was like, oh, I always ask them. I always do the joke, hey, you got any stock advice for me since you're a day ahead of me? So funny and stuff like that. But but yeah, so yeah, don't even get me started on that. But again, Gemma, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your journey with us, and just talking all things health and fitness. I really, really appreciate it. And everyone, go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below. And like I always say, buyer beware. You will get inspired to get off that couch and stop eating all those Twinkies. But again, Gemma, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
and thank you for having me as well. It's been great.
I appreciate that. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing off. Have a great day, everyone.